Welcome to this session where we will address how we create sustainable cities. Cities that meets the demands of its citizens and also meets the challenges of climate change. And cities where we take into account the need for a healthy environment and also where the creation of sustainable circular flows of materials can be a key enabler in this really important transition. My name is Katarina Johansson. I am moderator for this session, and I am also moderator for We Don't Have Time and chair of the independent think tank Global Utmaning, a global challenge. It's a Swedish think tank. So it's now my pleasure to introduce, to open this session, Per Larshans, who is Director of Sustainability at Ragn-Sells.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for the applaud and welcoming me. My story will be about one word. That's the word about must, that need to replace shall. Science is telling us that circular materials flows will not only support the reduction of carbon emissions in the world, but also be able to reduce the risk of overshoot any of the 9 planetary boundaries. Professor Ron Rockström, together with Sir Richard Attenborough, could in their movie Science of Our Planet, Breaking Boundaries, demonstrate the result. And science are clear. Circular materials flows will enable that. Well, why don't we do it? Do we need more recycling? Or should the construction companies make sure that they build with the right material from direct? Well, it's not that easy. And I would like to say no to that question in today's linear economy. I represent a recycling company in today's linear economy, and it means that we should be the one that creates some fantastic innovation that can bring back the resources. The problem that we face is that there's not a demand for the resources that we are then recirculating. So how can we make it happen? I'm very glad that during this COP, the circular dimension has really become into the discussion, not just in the closed sessions, but also from several of the politicians. Several of the sessions has been focusing on the circularity and the need to do that. We have seen it during this last year with the problem to get the resources around the world. So collecting circular material flows will be crucial also for our growth going forward. If we at the same time can then reduce the effect of overshoot any of the planetary boundaries, I would say yes to do it as soon as possible. The key word for me when it comes to creating those possibilities and has the city in the center. But how should we do it then? Well, I'm also very glad that during this COP, collaboration has been the key word. On this stage at the Swedish Pavilion, I have seen many of the global CEOs took the stage and say, we now need to change. It's no longer to work in silos, we need to work together. And that is a key question. So number one for me is collaboration. Secondly, if we're going to do it, we can't do everything at the same time. We need to focus. So we need to show that it's possible and enable it to happen. So if we do everything at the same time, we will fail. Then lead by examples. And we here really need to support the front runners. In the session today, you will meet one of the front runners, or I would say maybe all of them are front runners, but I would like to highlight Vasakronan. It's a real estate company in Sweden that has just received a really global award for their way of working. And we need really to support those front runners going forward. And for the fourth example is that we need to have the keyword must to be integrated in the way how we work. Here in Sweden, has Sweden become what I would say a role model. The policies now has been changed, so a new legislation has been put in place that say that when procurement are done, it's no longer from next year in February, I believe it is, it's no longer just shall. It is a must to take in consideration the climate dimension when you do the public procurement. When this will happen, suddenly The construction companies that are already developing the solutions will of course be able then to procure and make sure that we have the loops in place. We will later listen to Skanska, and I believe they are one of the ones that are already preparing for this to happen. Not just in one nation, but in many countries around the world. We have been able to, during this COP, give several examples of material flows that can become circular. I would like to highlight one example that is really also addressing this topic for today. And this is our collaboration with Tarkett. Tarkett is one of the biggest flooring companies in the world. What we have developed here together with them, with their support, is a solution how we can produce carbon negative calcium carbonate. Today you mine it from limestone, from the bedrock. You take it up, you incinerate it, and then after you produce the calcium carbonate. We have developed a method where we'll add on carbon dioxide into the ash mountains of Estonia and produce calcium carbonate. What is calcium carbonate used for? Well, almost any construction material contains calcium carbonate, like floorings or paints, etc. So here Tarkett has together with us joined now a task so that hopefully in 2025 we will start to be able to produce the first climate neutral carpets. And of course, if then the procurement process leads the way and make sure that you demand it, then we will have of course a competition and more companies need to do the same. I started to say that no more recycling. It's not that we are not the solution, and not that the construction companies are the solution. I would say that if the city of Stockholm, that has also will be here from very soon, if that policy is implemented in all countries around the world, all cities around the world, we will definitely say yes instead. Then the construction company will be the one that makes it happen and construct the buildings. And we, as today's recycler, will become a raw material producer and a detoxifier in the future circular economy. From Ragn-Sell's side, I would say we are ready. We are ready to take this task. So just press the button and we will be there. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Per Larsson. You'll be back for concluding remarks. It's now my pleasure to introduce 6 panelists. We have 3 here via Zoom and 3 here in the room. So let's start. Yes, we have them ready already. So a warm welcome from the top here, Mats Pellbeck-Sharp, Chief Sustainability Officer at Erickson. We have with us also Katarina Johansson, Vice Mayor of Environment and Climate, Stockholm, that was just mentioned, the beautiful capital of Sweden. And we also have with us Magnus Tengberg, who's Business Area Manager Real Estate at Vasakronan. That was just praised, so you look happy. Excellent. Thank you very much. And with us here in the room, I am honored to introduce John Conrad Bang from Stora Enso. Please join me here on stage. Niklas Gustafsson, who is Chief Sustainability Officer at Volvo Group. And also delighted to have with us Gregory, who is CEO of Skanska UK. So, terrific. And I know, John, you need to leave at 10 after 2, so bear that in mind. Let's start by, I'm going to start by asking you to give a 3-minute pitch. So let's start here with Mats Pellbeck-Sharp here on the wall behind us, with us on Zoom, just to give us a little bit of statement of how Erickson is working with this.
Well, I think that what we are doing is really providing new technologies and scaling new opportunities, providing the digital infrastructure that I think will be key for many of the solutions. We are running autonomous both transport of goods and people in the city setting, and providing the infrastructure and the way to do that in a also driverless environment where we need to be able to control these vehicles remotely. So it's not about taking away the driver necessarily, but we can have one driver controlling more vehicles and by that making it more efficient, scaling down the size of the vehicles and having more of them instead. So, and also by this means electrifying to a higher degree. So I think those are some of the examples that we are driving, and of course we see also the whole electricity grid and how to connect the different types of infrastructure to make the whole system more efficient as we move into more renewable energy in the grid. I think we need to connect the buildings, we need to connect the water systems and use all of these to have a more flexible and balanced infrastructure in the cities. So I think those are some of the things where I think our technology will be instrumental in driving the opportunities and the change.
Well, thank you very much, Mats. Let's turn now to Gregory here on stage to give a 3-minute, roughly, pitch.
Okay, thanks very much. So I think it's an interesting exercise to consider what is a truly sustainable city. What should it look like? And therefore, how should it be constructed, which is where we come in. It's a valuable exercise to do because it creates a vision, it gives you something to aim for. But I want to pull you back to where we are actually today. The cities of the world are generally all built. So we're not starting from a blank sheet of paper. And in fact, 80% of the buildings that exist in the world at the moment will also still exist in 2050, when most of the targets come to finish. So we have to bear that in mind. We're not starting with a blank piece of paper. That's the reality that we're faced with. So if I look at the challenges, more one about what do we actually need to do to change what we already have, rather than what do we need to do in order to build from scratch. The skills are totally different. And one of the fundamental constraints that we also need to consider is that when we're changing our cities to be more sustainable cities, we've got to protect what the city does, the way it lives and breathes and how it functions. So let me mention just maybe a couple of changes that I think are necessary. Whatever we do build from new needs to be extremely carefully designed, and it needs to be designed with whole life consideration. We've got to now, because they don't really exist at the moment, create the genuine links between the creation, the design, the use, and then potentially the deconstruction. And those links don't actually exist at the moment. When you look at, we have one organisation that develops a building and then they sell it to another organisation that uses the building, and therefore money can't flow easily between the two and invest in the smart design for an easy building to use. And then I go to a point that was made earlier on about sort of circular materials economy. At the moment, from a construction perspective, we don't really reuse much at all. And that's largely because it's the physical materials that are useful to us. So yes, we reuse bricks sometimes, but if you look at the rest of what goes into buildings, we're not really reusing it. So the opportunity is massive from that perspective. And we've actually got to form the new partnerships, the new collaborations, as was already talked about, to enable that reuse of materials at the moment. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Let's now turn to Stockholm, to Katarina Johansson, for your perspective, please.
Thank you very much. And of course, as the Vice Mayor for Environment and Climate, I'm delighted to be here today to listen to this very interesting conversation. And I actually just arrived here after launching the city's new plan on circular construction and reducing construction waste plan. So I will talk a little bit about that plan later. So in Stockholm, we have a long history of reducing our CO2 emissions. We actually cut our CO2 emissions in half since 1990, which is more than many countries and cities promised to do in 2030. But we're always looking for new ways of reducing our carbon footprint. So Stockholm has put a goal to be fossil fuel free and climate positive in 2040. And for us to reach this, we really need new models to work with and to always have sustainability on top of mind. So the work on urban development and with circular infrastructure and carbon smart construction is really an important topic in this transformation. Key actions to be CO2 positive includes the collection and recycling of household waste, making biogas from food waste and recycling garden waste to make biochar, Decarbonizing our citywide district heating system, putting requirements for energy efficiency, and we are working for the adaptation of a more circular approach within the whole building sector. But I would really like to underline the importance of adopting a more circular thinking even when we build and renovate our buildings. According to the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, construction and demolition in Sweden annually generates approximately 10 million tons of waste. And Swedish buildings are estimated to account for about 20% of the emissions in Sweden. And in Stockholm, we estimate that the CO2 emissions from the building industry is as much as from our road transport system in Stockholm. So we really need to handle the building industry in a new way. So even if the construction sector is progressively becoming more climate friendly, there is still a long way to go if we want to reach our city's goal of becoming climate positive by 2040. So we're actually actively working to create preconditions to find more circular building processes. And as a first step, as the first concrete step in a long-term effort to increase the building sector's circularity, we now have adopted a new plan for circular building processes and reduce construction waste. And the city's action plan have a focus on testing new ways of working and to increase knowledge through pilot projects with reused and recycled building materials and contains several measures to reduce construction waste. The city, with its infrastructure and ownership of about 10% of Stockholm's buildings, provides a unique platform to find new collaborations for the development of industry and academia, to develop new smart solutions and new innovations so we can scale up and we can see that they work. So I'm quite certain that this will be the path forward for many of our cities and countries. And I would like to share these ideas with other cities, of course. So thank you for now.
Thank you very much, Katarina Luren. I'm now turning to Magnus at Vasakronan. And Magnus, I know you want to share a slide. See how we can run this.
Hi, everyone. Magnus here. Thank you for coming. And also thank you, Per Larsson, for kind words. I hope you see this. Oh, no, I don't. Okay, perhaps this is an answer why we have come quite far.
There we go.
Our, okay.
Yes.
Why we have come a little bit quite far with our sustainability work in Vasakronan, and this is our long-term targets within sustainability, and I think they are really clear for us in the company, and they are also engaging in some way. And so we say that our entire value chain will be climate neutral by 2030. So what we have done is that we have developed a roadmap that points out climate neutrality by 2030 in our value chain, the whole value chain, and that includes management of buildings and what we can do together with customer and clients, and also companies like Ragn-Sells. And we also look at our indirect emissions in our construction projects. And the second one, our properties, they are self-sufficient and do not require energy to be purchased. Yeah, that's really interesting because we like to have so much own produced energy as possible. So in fact, we have one of Sweden's biggest solar cell parks in Uppsala, and geoenergy are also interesting for us. And we also have examples where artificial intelligence is key for us to reduce energy. And our business and customers generate new waste that is not possible to recycle or reuse. Yeah, so what we're doing today is fantastic, I think, because this is also a key issue. So we must see waste as a resource. And we only use renewable, recycle and reuse materials in our construction projects. This is the most challenging one, I think, and it's where we need to cooperate and work together. So I see this is where we have to turn a whole business into a circular industry. And it's quite linear today, I will say. So, yeah, that's for me now.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Magnus. And I'm now turning to Niklas Gustafsson here from Volvo Group. Please share your perspective on today's topic.
Thank you very much, Katarina. And thank you for arranging yet another excellent seminar on an interesting theme. And what is then Volvo Group doing here? Talking about buildings and construction and circularity and so on. Of course, since everything fits together, transportation comes into the picture quite quickly. Our scope 3 emissions is of course our products in use, trucks, buses, construction equipment. That's actually where we have maybe something like 95 or even more % of our CO2 footprint. That's in our scope 3. But our scope 3 is someone else's scope 1 and 2. So that's why we really need, and if you start looking into any company in whatever sector actually, more or less, you come quite quickly to transport and how we are going to solve that as a team in partnerships then. So concentrating on cities then and our transition into electromobility, we talk about moving from a brown platform, a diesel-driven platform, over to a green platform which is electrified then. It's electrified by battery electric vehicles, trucks, buses, construction equipment. It's also electrified by batteries, but it's also electrified by hydrogen-driven fuel cells. And to drive this transition, because we don't have much time to do this, to drive this transition, we really need to find the drivers that are there for real, that is doing change for real. And who is that? It's absolutely cities in the forefront doing this. Of course, city buses going full electric, but also transport of goods into the cities and garbage out of the cities. We will need to do that also in the future, right? So it needs to be really, really much more sustainable. And it's also doable from a technical perspective, actually much easier than the long distance hauling of goods. So we've been running electric buses already for 7 years now. Full city of Gothenburg, small city, but still fully electrified on the bus side. But also on the distribution trucks, on the garbage collection trucks and so on. Fully electrified, it's out there. It's not for anyone to, how long do we need to wait and so on. So we can make a difference. And when it comes to the role of cities in this transition, I don't think it can be, overestimated. Sorry, it's a huge potential in driving the global shift. Even though cities are actually only covering like 3% of the land use in the world, it's like 72% of the full greenhouse gas footprint. So if we can make it in the cities, it will make a huge difference. And there I think transport plays a role.
Thank you very much, Niklas. And I'm turning to John for your reflections.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm really happy to be in a session about cities and construction. I think it's overlooked often. Climate change debate has very much been about energy transition. Then came food on. They're all really important. But we have to remember how big impactors buildings really are. It's a big market. The construction market in the EU is about 1 trillion euros, and it's almost the same in US. And we have a double situation here. On the one side, most of the buildings we have will stand. But then on the other side, we're looking into 2 billion square meters of growth annually at a global level. So it's about renovating what we have, and it's about construction of new buildings. 40% of non-energy related emissions come from buildings, so it has a very, very big impact on the climate change agenda. And we really believe that wood can help transform the building sector into a low carbon into low-carbon cities. Every time we use 1 square meter of wood on average to substitute fossil-based building materials, and that's an average number, we reduce 1.5 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Some people have said that if we maximize the use of buildings, we're not only talking about wooden buildings, we're talking about wood in hybrid buildings, but if we maximize the use, we may be able to actually save half a gigaton a year, every year. Now, that is a step forward, but even that is not enough. So that points to the circular question. And whereas I think that, Skanska is here, we are here, there are other construction companies using sustainable materials, we feel, I think, we're leapfrogging the materials right now. But honestly, the big challenge is the circularity, and that's where the whole positive impact will be amplified. And circularity, I guess everybody will admit, is very, very difficult. And it's not to be pessimistic, it's just difficult because it's just no single actor that can really... You can prepare your products so that they're circular by design, of course, but then the rest is one big change in how materials are flowing in the economy, and it's one big change in infrastructure. And I will end with that and point at how big the question about public-private collaboration is when we talk about circularity. That is often mentioned, but I think we have to learn fast how to collaborate between the public and private. We've been trying, we are doing it, but it always proved difficult actually. And we need to halve emissions in 9 years' time, so the public-private ability to collaborate just needs to accelerate. And I'll end for now here.
Thank you very much. I'm turning back to Niklas here because we had a little chat before the session, and you mentioned, speaking on public-private collaboration, an initiative to reach out to mayors in cities. Could you please share this with the audience? It's a great example of the public-private initiative.
Absolutely, Katarina. Thank you for allowing me to do that. I think, we have lots of progressive mayors out there in the world that wants to be the leaders. Their city should be the first one, carbon neutral and zero emissions and everything. That's great. I think the force of this combined over the world between the mayors is huge, actually. We are at COP26. World leaders are here to negotiate, right? How to solve these things. That's fine. Let's hope for the best. But the real doers out there is actually the ones that can change things today. And the mayors have that capability. They have the right tools to do it. And if they just can combine, and preferably if they can do it in a combined way at the same time, you can do what we are suggesting from Volvo Group to all mayors that wants to listen in the world, is to implement zero emission zones right now, so that we make the city centers zero emission. Don't go for this emission level or that emission level and make this pattern of different rules. Make zero emissions to get access with your heavy duty vehicles, and it will drive the transition. For real, it will drive the market, because if we can align that we will have zero emission cities all over the world already now, it will drive the market, it will drive the technology forward, and not only for the zero emission vehicles that are designed for the cities, but actually also then next step is easy to connect one city with another city. And then you get, step by step into more long haul and more heavy transport and so on. So mayors out there, go for it. Zero emission city access.
Thank you. Of course, now we have to turn to Katarina Lur for reflections, and also I'd like for all of you to dwell a bit on the public-private partnerships and what we really need from policymakers. And we're here at the COP, but as Niklas mentioned, there are other levels of decision makers than the government negotiators that are very busy now. So Katarina, please add your perspective as a mayor of the importance. Is also maybe reflect on the climate zones that Niklas just mentioned. See if we can hear you. Yes, can you hear us, Katarina? Did we lose audio for our panelists? Zoom panelists, let's see if we can check with the technicians. While we wait for this, please, Ganska, what is your perspective on the public-private partnerships possible and also the decision makers on other levels than all the way up?
Yeah, I think the public sector actually has a huge opportunity to influence movement in the right direction because they are the largest procurer. And some really robust, strong, brave leadership maybe in terms of what they're asking through their procurement process can actually drive some really significant change. From a contractor's perspective, we win all of our work. So actually, the customers can set the bar as high as they like. All we're really looking for is that the bar is equal for all of the competitors.
Good point.
So you set the bar high, and we will learn to jump high. So you can set maybe a zero-emission city, zero-emission centre of a city. We will respond to that extremely well, and we will form those partnerships with other organisations that can help do that. So my suggestion would be set your bar high.
Excellent, Gregor. Now see if we can have Katarina with us. Your reflections, please, Katarina. Here you go.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I lost you for a while there, so I
didn't
hear all your discussions. But I think the collaboration is really important, and as we heard, that mayors has to make things possible, and I think we also have to put the goals and targets in place, like we were talking about the emission-free zones, for example, that we decide to have that. And then we need all the industry and academia and civil society to help us to reach our goals. So I think the collaboration is really key. And in Stockholm, we work on all different levels with procurement, for example, when we try to put higher and higher targets for everything we want to reach, but also that we put targets for CO2 emissions. We have a CO2 budget that we use that puts the frames for how much emissions we can have. And I think everyone needs to know that, but then we have to discuss together how to reach the goals, what techniques to use. And since I'm a politician, I'm not an engineer. I need all the help I can get to go there.
So Katarina, when you hear Gregor here say just raise the bar and we'll jump higher, what is your response?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that shows every time we take a new program or raise our standards and we do our procurement processes, there will always be someone that has ideas how to do that. So I think that's really important. But I mean, I can't go as high as no one can help me to do things. I mean, we have to have some kind of stair that people have to walk up to, but we're raising our ambitions all the time. And I think also our emission-free zones will be bigger, and also our emission rate will be faster as many more citizens and businesses we will get on board.
Thank you. During the days I've been moderating here at the Business Hub, the Swedish Pavilion, there has been much talk about how businesses really drive change, that they're pushing the politicians in front of them with their strong initiatives, and that's also the sense that I've really strongly believe is happening. So Mats Pellbeck-Sharp, from your perspective, you've been here, you just came back, and is that true? I mean, what could businesses do? Now we talk about circularity primarily, but also enabling with different. Well, ICT, of course, the ICT industry is a key enabler for this. But how do you see your role as a push for regulatory purposes?
I think what we just heard about Stockholm sort of raising the bar, and also from Skanska about that is important. I think if that could be done in a slightly different way than in each sort of procurement, but rather having a long-term, a little more years, and say that by this year we will have this bar, I think that would help industry to know the rules. And I think that is, I mean, already in the fireside chat between Johan Rockström and our CEO Börje, last Friday on We Don't Have Time, I think Börje said the same thing. If we could sort of give us the long-term stable rules, and then we will raise to the challenge. And I think that is really how I see a good policy framework for us to work within, to give a couple of years, make it technology neutral, and put it up as challenges for industry to come up with innovations and solutions. Then I think what industry really can do as well is to demonstrate that it's not only proof of concepts and concept study, that we can scale the existing solutions now. And I think that is one thing that I see is lacking in general. There are so many things that we can do with existing solutions, and sometimes I get the feeling that both industry and political leaders talk about the next solution rather than the existing one. And we really need to sort of implement the existing solutions now to bend the curve. We don't have time to wait until we have fossil-free steel. We need to or have the time to retrofit all buildings. We could start by installing better IT solutions on the existing buildings and reduce the energy consumption in them already now by connecting them, and do the same with water systems. That is a much faster way to sort of start doing things now. And I think that is, both from an industry and a political side, extremely important. We heard about hydrogen. Hydrogen is a fantastic way of storing renewable energy. But before we have hydrogen vehicles, if we focus on hydrogen for transport now, instead of doing the electrification that we can do much faster, then we sort of lose a couple of years on things. And I think we need both. So let's focus on the things that are available and the existing solutions and scale them. That is what we showed in the Exponential Roadmap report, that with these solutions that we have now, we can bend the curve and we can make the 2030 be possible on a 1.5 degree pathway if we scale existing solutions. We don't need to do the inventions. We need the inventions because we need to have something that comes after 2030. But really by existing solutions, and you have heard about Ragn-Sells solutions and the facilities and Volvo and Skanska, we have all the technology we need. We need to scale it, and that is what we sort of need to do now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the gentlemen here on stage, they're nodding, Mats. I'm not sure you see this from wherever you are in Sweden, but they are. So I'd like to turn to John now, because you have to leave fairly soon. Your reflections on the need for policy, what are those?
Well, first I would like to reflect on this, the last intervention, to which I agree generally, but I do think there is this dilemma between best practice and next practice that is real, because the level of reductions we need to see is so big that during the 2020s and into the 30s, we really need to accelerate. I think that has to be the decade of acceleration. The problem with buildings and many other things, such as big ships or big production facilities, is that they have a long life cycle. And what is best practice now, if we achieve a 1.5 degree pathway, what is best practice now, greenness now, will definitely not be just in 3 to 4 years. So there is this question about how high should you actually raise the bar. I think, for example, with certain wooden applications, we're already ready to jump high. We don't even need to learn it. It's there. But you then have a problem from a budget point of view often. So there is a question here about innovative financing models. There is a delta later where if carbon prices are rising because we're on a 1.5 degree, then the economy of a certain next practice choice will actually prove over the life cycle to be good. But if you just go with current prices, it's not. That delta, who can finance that? Who can de-risk that operation? That's also where I would look to the public sector. Also, to some extent, pension funds, we see them going in and do that. But I think that financing part is really important. Then the next thing I would say with the public is, what is probably my biggest worry is not for a lack of will. We see some public administrations in the planet where there is a lack of will. We see many where there is no lack of will now. But you need regulatory frameworks for all these new solutions. And can the public sector make them fast enough? Because as you said before, private sector is actually spearheading this. I think we are with some of our value chain partnerships. I mean, we in pre-COP in Italy, we launched a big partnership with Lend-Lease and about breaking through with innovation on building, on construction material. But we need regulatory frameworks around that, and they actually need to come faster and faster and faster. So I think that's a worry you can have, whether the public sector are able to just follow the pace.
Anybody would like to add? Thank you very much, John. Yes, go ahead, Gregory.
Yeah, I go back to where the whole discussion started with that word must. I think the public sector has a really good opportunity to put must into their requirements. And taking one of the earlier points, it doesn't actually have to be must now. It could be must by 3 years' time, which deals with the ability for the industry to sort of scale up to it. Because a huge amount of the technology to make our buildings smart already exists. But there's more incentive required in order to get people to absolutely scale it. And a good example of that, we know that a huge amount of the emissions comes from the energy used within our existing buildings. Sure. And yet the design of new buildings isn't really linked to being able to provide very, very efficient buildings in use, smart buildings where your pump can actually tell you it doesn't need replacing in 5 years, it's fine, it's happy, it's running really nicely, and it can, you can wait another 2 years for that. You've saved some money and you just saved some carbon as well. Very simple example, but you scale that into a big way and across the city, that's a lot of saving.
Thank you very much, Gregory. Would you like to comment, Magnus, from Vasakronan?
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear the discussion about set the bar high, and I really like that. But I will also say that regulations and standards must follow. We have some examples, of course, from our business where we could see that we have perfect building materials that we could use in new constructions. But we are not allowed to. We will not have building permits and so on. So,
could you give an example of what material that would be?
Yeah. In one case, we had 250 doors that we could just, they were in good shape, good condition, so we could just move them to another building. But they were 3 centimeters too narrow. So you couldn't, if you look into the books, perhaps you couldn't pass with a wheelchair. So this was about mobility impairment. But we could show that this is possible. So when it comes to circularity and reuse of building materials, we must work in a different way. We can't trust on the standard. We must try to verify quality and performance in different kind of constructions and building materials. So that's another way to work. And I think that is what we must do. And I would also say that when it comes to legislation and regulations, I think the demands are too low. We have much higher requirements from our owners when it comes to sustainability. And I will connect that to what you said, John, that our owners, they see that they have, this is good for our finance. The more green we are, it's profitable. So I would say, don't wait 3 years, act now.
Well, thank you very much, Magnus. I'd like to change a bit of the angle here, or we'll stay within the topic, but talk about virgin materials versus recycled materials. So this is primarily a question to John and to Gregor and also maybe Magnus. Bear with me, Niklas and Mats. I'll be back to you. So, John, when it comes to emissions, roughly 50% of the carbon emissions come from extracting virgin materials. So how much of these materials would you say are even plausible, feasible to actually recirculate from your perspective?
Well, and first of all, generally it's too little, right? Overall in the economy, we're way below 10% that goes into the economy again, even once. Exactly how far we can go, I don't know, but I don't think a number there matters. We need to focus 100% on that. It's the only way. There is no single technology, be it building materials or in other sectors, that can even take us close to a sustainable path. The 1.5 degrees, but you can also think about the other planetary boundaries, as was mentioned in the beginning. There's just no single. So it is actually all about recycling. We are at very, very low level generally, and we also want to recycle much more. Our long-term vision is to be 100% circular in what we do, but that's the point where there is the longest way to go. That's the most difficult thing to crack, because it's both about design, production processes, but then it's about infrastructure. And if you think about how the infrastructure is on waste and on materials, we're not even close. We have a few. We have a plant, a pilot in Poland with Tetra Pak, where we're actually closing a loop, which we're very proud of. But I say it in this way because, on that topic, we're at the small pilot stage right now. So that needs to accelerate. And for there, we're back to the public sector, because a lot of that infrastructure, also both regulatory-wise, but also investments in infrastructure, that has to come from the public side.
And Magnus mentioned regulatory, but they could be a little bit narrow-minded, referring to the doors. They couldn't really reuse them. Is that a case also when it comes to using recycled materials? And in what aspects do we need to really shine a light on this? I'd like to turn to Gregor now.
Yeah, I think one of the big aspects of that, maybe it's not so much the regulatory point, but it's every time you hand over a building, you're handing it over with a warranty. So if you're incorporating new, not tested over sufficient time, or a long time, let's call it, materials, or materials that maybe are recycled, reused.
The liability aspect.
Yeah, it's the liability of that. So that is a real issue. And just to add a little bit of sort of data, at the moment, and this is a UK figure, it's only 40% of our waste in the construction industry is actually recycled. And I say recycled, and that tends to be downcycled, so probably moved into fill material for roads. Very, very little is reused.
So, Gregory, when people hear Skanska, they very often associate you with concrete, and you're now turning very much into using wood in many constructions, obviously. What is your take on the possibility, the quite promising now, to recycle concrete?
Well, concrete obviously has a process associated with it, and I think most of the effort at the moment is going into cement-free concrete, because the cement is the sort of really hungry carbon aspect to it, and that's possible. So there are ways of doing that. But I think you're absolutely in the right place, because we've got to tackle the big priorities first, and concrete is one of them. Steel is another one. That's another very hungry carbon emitter. And steel is just crying out to be recycled. It's relatively easy compared to other things to deconstruct from a building, resmelt it, reuse it.
Thank you very much, Gregor. And Niklas, I'll like to turn back to you and then to Mats. In terms of industry's responsibility, now we're out of the pandemic. Well, we're on our way out of the pandemic, we hope. There's still high numbers in many countries, obviously. So the role as for industry leaders like you, and everybody here on stage, we have a public representative too. What is your role to really push for this transition when it comes to creating sustainable cities? And how can you use this momentum that might be possible right now?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. But looking at the city, and it's a very complex ecosystem, right? So if it's one thing that we do know, it is that it will be many actors that needs to collaborate to get it right, to get the solution there. So for us in the industry, all of us that are sort of in the forefront in our own industry transition, it's important that we get this collaboration and partnership. And I'm not talking as we've been doing now for 10, 15 years that we need to collaborate, Greg, and let's go home and then we see each other in 2 years' time and we don't do it. Because now what we actually do is it's no longer a coalition of willing people, it's a coalition of doers here, actually. So I mean, it's happening as we speak. And if it's one thing I really take with me from COP is that it's so many examples from the private sector, which is for real, which is happening, and it's not happening in 3 years' time, it's happening now, for real. So I think, we need to push, we need to raise the bar, absolutely, and we should not be naive. It's a lot of challenges out there, obviously, and I agree with Mats in Erickson. They are doing a great job on connecting everything, by the way, which is absolutely necessary. That we need to use to catch the low-hanging fruits, the things that we actually can do today. There are a lot of them, honestly. But at the same time, my old friend John from Copenhagen is also very much right. We don't have time to only do incremental stuff now. We simply don't have that time. So we need to find a way at the same time to actually address the transition, the dramatic paradigm shift transition. So we need to do both of them in parallel. And if I can add then, it's a role for the private actors to take here. We have a huge responsibility, honestly, to do that. And for policymakers, try to also to concentrate on the low-hanging fruits. What can be done in a regulatory and legislative and policy way to support this transition? Because now I think it's a little bit more like, can policymakers actually follow the industry transition? Because it goes so extremely quickly. And we need their help, and if I can come back to the cities then, it's great that Stockholm is talking with everyone in Stockholm, but what we really need is to talk with each other between cities and agree on how to actually do things together. My friend John lives in Copenhagen. If you just take the closest city there is Malmö. If you want to drive a truck into Copenhagen today, you need to be on Euro 5 level, which is an emission level on diesels. If you want to go into Malmö, 7 kilometers away over a bridge, you need to have a Euro 6 trucks. Meaning that the trucks that are allowed in Copenhagen won't be allowed in Malmö. I mean, this is just stupid. Make it zero emissions everywhere.
Thank you, Niklas. Short reflection for Katarina before I turn to Mats here. Are you able to keep up? That's a good question. And also, how do you collaborate with other mayors? If I'm not too forgetful, you are part of the Covenant of Mayors, aren't you, Stockholm? Yes. So how do you collaborate between the cities, and how do you hang out and really? Thank you very much, John. He has to leave. How do you collaborate in this speeding up the transition?
We do have a lot of collaborations. I'm in the steering group of the Covenant of Mayors, and the city of Stockholm is also part of the Eurocities, and we're also part of the C40 group. So, we have a lot of collaborations, and we try to spread good examples and steal good examples. So,
good steal.
Yes, good. But I think that probably... we really get the good ideas from each other, but the networks are really key to be able to know what is going on in other cities. And I think I have been to a lot of the COP meetings, and I think one of the most important things is also to see what is going on everywhere. There's people doing things in all the cities. They're doing different things, but there are things going on all the time. So I think we need to work faster, all of us, not only the mayors, but also the companies. And I have in Stockholm, I'm in charge of the Climate Pact, and there are 350 different companies in the Stockholm region that is part of the Climate Pact. And we're exchanging ideas in different groups, working on transport issues and on food issues. So, we do have to collaborate, but I think still there are a lot of things to be done. I also agree that a lot of the inventions are already there, so we can work on the transition. But I think that we need new economic models, so the linear systems won't be cheaper than the circular models. I think we need new inventions to be able to do things faster and cheaper. So I think we all have to work together and work faster because we don't have a lot of time now.
Thank you very much, Katarina. And Mats, your take on collaboration to speed up.
Well, collaboration, I think, not only collaboration, I think you talked about the post-COVID, and I think the COVID has really taught us the power of digitalization and the importance of having secure digital solutions to be able to manage healthcare, education, transport, and a lot of the things that we couldn't do. I mean, 5-10 years ago, we managed to do during COVID, thanks to these technologies. And I think we need, in a way, to learn and use the good things that we have learned, but also take in the human touch and be able to meet each other. And I think this meeting is a very good example of sort of a hybrid section where 3 people are in Sweden and 3 people are on stage. And I think it works. I mean, except that we lost sound for a couple of seconds, it has worked really, really well to sort of be part of and feel that we are part of the discussion. So I think that those are just examples of what we do. And I think back to what I said earlier about the solutions, they are not incremental solutions. They are exponential solutions. We really need to scale them exponentially. And I think that is also something that is significant for digital technologies, is that the change happens so fast, and we should use that because we are sort of in a hurry to bend the curve. So even if the solution is existing, it doesn't mean that it's an incremental solution. I think we need to scale the new ones and the digital ones, but also other solutions that are available. But we need to scale them exponentially and not sort of taking incremental steps. So if I was unclear earlier, I think just wanted to get that right. Collaboration, you said. I think what we see now from industry side is not one company driving things. We see ecosystems building across industry. There are work where we are working, for instance, with several of our customers, with competitors, with suppliers, with other sectors to create solutions across. So, I mean, we are working in the Pathway Coalition with several companies. We are working with other companies where there are clothing companies, furniture companies, transport companies, electricity companies, and transporters in the same work. So I think the collaboration and the ecosystem building that is happening right now is pretty unique, and it's often sort of have a digital component, but it's also one common problem or a joint solution that we are looking at. So all the different partners on a horizontal way working across industries. And I think that is really how I see solutions happening now. Because if we look on it, we have developed solutions in silos and within our value chain. But now we see that, we have Volvo and Skanska, and we're talking about how we can drive electric buses into buildings and working together with municipalities and creating new rules and working with the building sort of Vasakronan and others. So I think this is really an ecosystem of different companies that creates different types of coalitions on different levels and work together too. So I think that collaboration will need to be enhanced and I think that is really where we will find the solutions, because when we cross these borders, that's also when we start to think more innovatively.
Well, thank you very much, Mats. I'd like now to shift perspective a little bit again and talk about how to measure, how to set targets and how to follow up. So would you like to start to share your thoughts on this, Niklas, how you work with setting targets and also measuring of course, we're talking about carbon emissions here.
Yeah. No, this is really important. Not at least from a transparency perspective, of course. So science-based targets is the thing, I would say, for each and every company to not only sign up to and sort of tick the box that we are also part of the science-based target thing, but actually what we learned within a big company like Volvo with 100,000 employees and 190 countries and so is that it's also really important in the internal transition, which is not only a technological transition but also a mindset transition.
Of course.
We are all people that have been working with the diesel internal combustion engine for 100 years, right? And so it's a huge thing to change this, right? So transparency and really not, from inside to outside, from our own employees to our partners and to society in general, that we can actually follow this, not only commitments that is 10, 20, 30 years away, but actually something that we can follow every year. So I think that is really important, and a complement, I must say, also to regulations. We are a heavily regulated industry in the automotive industry, as the building industry, but it's not easy. I understand, to make a regulation that is covering everything in the right way. So actually, science-based targets is covering the full scope, the ones that the citizens want to really know. What is the CO2 footprint for real? And the regulation usually comes into a little bit of nitty-gritty details on the efficiency of an engine or a gearbox or what have you, right? And it doesn't give the complete picture. So I think as a complement to regulations, we need also to have a transparent reporting on the full scope.
Thank you, Niklas. Gregor, Skanska's perspective on measuring and following up. And setting targets, of course.
Yeah. I think you need to be careful when you're setting your target, that you're setting the right target and it's based on the right data. Because what comes after the target is your plan.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, yes.
And for those organisations that actually do have a relatively big Scope 3, as we just heard with Volvo, if you're at Scope 1 and Scope 2 measurement at the moment and you haven't included Scope 3 yet, your plan's going to be this big and it should be that big. So I think you need to be very careful that you think far enough ahead and get, even if it's a strategy that you don't fully understand how to achieve it, at least know where you're trying to get to. Yeah, and then maybe go get some partners that can help. So be very careful with your strategy and the targets that you're setting.
Thank you, Gregor. Magnus, Vasakronan, how do you address this the target setting and the measuring?
Well, I think it's important that the industry overall has the same way to calculate and describe, for example, how to calculate carbon dioxide in construction projects. So actually we are counting everything. So we are trying to collect information from the whole organization, from our projects, from what we're doing when it comes to energy consumption and waste handling. So we have quite few targets, and but I think they are clear. So but we have much to learn, I will say also, and perhaps that's what is one thing that we must talk about more. We are talking about change. We are talking about upscaling and pilots and new ways to work from linear to circular. But all the people in the organization, they must learn to work in a new way. So I think we will have more talk about management.
Thank you for adding that perspective. And Niklas, you touched on this too. We all need to be leaders in this transition. Doesn't matter what level in the organization you're at. You have to lead by example and also live by example and try the solutions that you speak about and really live the transition. So I'd like to turn to Katarina now for targets and measurements, and then I'll give the Mats the last word on this one.
Okay, in Stockholm we have been measuring our own emissions for a long time. I said that we have cut our total emissions in half since 1990, and per capita it's almost 70% less emissions per person now and year. But we also know that the consumption perspective is so much higher than the emissions that we have in the city.
It's not in there. So,
Yes. So what we tried to do for a while was to calculate all our consumption emissions, which was very difficult. Then we went to finding chunks of the most important sectors, and that was food, for example, traveling, and also the construction sector. So these 3 areas are now measured, and we're trying to work on those 3 big chunks of emissions that we have outside the city border. So we will involve more and more areas, but we have been trying to find the biggest emitters and try to start working on them, putting targets on the emissions for them. So I think it's really important that you can also show that what you're trying to do is actually giving an effect, but sometimes you can't take all the different emissions in account at the same time. With the most significant, I would say.
Thank you very much, Katarina Lur. Mats Pellbeck-Sharp, measuring targets. I know quite a lot about this already because we've been talking a lot about with Erickson during these 2 weeks here, and you are, of course, part of the Race to Zero and the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. But please add your perspective.
Yeah, a couple of things, I think. I mean, the uptake among leading companies now on setting a net zero target at 2040, 2050, some are trying to do it earlier. But if you follow the latest standard that was published by the Race to Zero, that will be extremely difficult, I think. So I think the advantage of net zero target is that it covers the whole value chain. So you have to cover 90% of your value chain emissions. So independent if you are like Volvo and Skanska and Erickson that have 80% of our emissions in the user phase or more, or if you are in a company like Samsung that have 90% upstream by producing silicon or displays for their devices, you have to create an ecosystem and share those targets within your value chain. And I think that is a really good thing about it. So agreeing with what Skanska said, and also the science-based target, but there you have a minimum of 5 years. I think there is a risk with these targets that focusing so long out, some management might sort of relax a little bit. Somebody else will inherit my targets. I will not be here in 5 or 10 or 20 years. It will be 3 management teams later that will need to inherit that. So at Ericsson, we are really focusing on setting sort of targets annually that leads us on the way to the long-term objectives. So I think that is extremely important. And then finally, we talked about sort of knowing your value chain. We can say that leading companies have sort of life cycle assessment and understand the full scope of scope 1, 2, and 3 and emissions. But if you are a smaller company or just starting with this, we have the 1.5 degree supply chain leaders initiative helping our suppliers and partners really to get started. And in that, we tell them to focus on scope 1 and 2. But also to tell their suppliers to focus on scope 1 and 2, because then, I mean, if we cover all scope 1 and 2, that is relatively easy to understand and control, then we will cover the full value chain. So I think to make it easier for sort of beginners and climate targets for dummies, it's really to focus on your scope 1 and 2 and understand your direct impact and start there. And then you can sort of learn more about the scope 3 and understanding the emissions that you have from your products, etc. But I think for the leading companies, I definitely agree. We have to cover the whole value chain. So I think that is how we see it, at least.
Thank you, Mats. It's time for me to thank the panel. Thank you very much, Niklas. Thank you very much, Gregory, Katarina, Mats, and Magnus for sharing your insights and your perspectives and how we facilitate this transition. And the key words, as I've picked up, is, of course, as always, when we are on this stage, collaboration, connected with innovation, and also leadership. That we can all do this. We all have to be leaders in this transition. So thank you so much for joining us here. And it's now my pleasure to reintroduce Per Lans-Hans on stage to give the concluding remarks. Bye-bye. Zoom participants, bye. You have the floor, Per.
Thank you so much, Katarina. And thank you so much, dear speakers. I think we agree. Collaboration will be a key factor going forward. And I summarized some of the things that you said. And the very first thing I picked was raise the bar. Raise the level that we create a level playing field, and not so high that we can't jump over it. But if you want to have high targets, make sure that you then have it in a far future, 3 years, 4 years, so we make sure that we can develop solutions. We need to connect people is also what I pick up here. We need to make sure that we can connect them, either digitally, and it's really funny, when we are setting up our new supply chains that will be circular, we suddenly often end up that there's an Erickson system that are involved. Or we need transport, we have Volvo. So connecting people and make sure that everything are able to monitor are really crucial. We have heard also that our industries are ready to create circular material flows if that has become a must. So we are ready to do that. We heard it both from Stora Enso and from Skanska here. It is possible. We have the front runners, and I truly agree that 2030 is a really high ambition. But I have seen what Vasakronan are doing, and they are really a role model, and they're really pushing us. They want to have all the numbers. We are today a supplier for them, and they are really very strong in their demand on us as a supplier. But we also have a collaboration with the city of Stockholm. Together with Vasakronan, we have a city concept called Beloved City. And here is a concept where we also have Bring as a transport company, the Norwegian Post. And we take the parcels, or Bring take the parcels to our city hub. That means that we eliminate a lot of heavy traffic into the city, because we are then, as a garbage company, transporting the parcel out to the end customer, take back returns, but also take back the waste. And we do that with 100% electric trucks. So suddenly, from very high emissions, a lot of heavy traffic, there's almost eliminated. It would have not been possible if the city of Stockholm didn't have the high ambitions. Like we have a real estate company, like Vasakronan, that really enables it to happen. And of course, the collaboration between, in this case, Ragn-Sells and Bring. And so I believe that when it comes to the end of my conclusion here, before I just recommend another session that we start at 5 o'clock, Stockholm is truly a role model. And I hope that Katarina will be so occupied in sharing knowledge to other cities around the world. And I heard that she said, I'm stealing from others. Well, she is using her 2 ears. And that's what we need to do more. Learn from others, steal with pride, and share knowledge. If we do things together, we will make this planet a much better place to live at. If you want to have more insight about the possibilities in the toolbox, at 5 o'clock we will have the last session here from Business Sweden's Pioneer the Possible scene. It will be about recycling quotas of plastics. And you will have the Minister of Environment from Denmark that has really set high ambitions, really raising the bar in how we can create circular material flows of plastics. And to be honest, here we have a huge problem because there's so little plastics that today goes into recirculation. So if you're interested to find out more how it's done, please come back here at 5 o'clock at this stage. So thank you so much, viewers online. Thank you so much, Katarina, for a great moderating of this session. So
thank you, Per.
Don't keep what has been said here at the COP. Make sure that you take it home and do action. Thank you so much.
Thank you.